People say office politics are harmless until you're the one standing in a room full of applause, meant for someone who used your work to get ahead. That morning, I didn't feel angry. I felt invisible, like I'd suddenly become background noise in a place where I'd spent 5 years holding the structure together. My name is Michael, 37, senior analyst in a mid-sized logistics firm. Not the type of job that makes for exciting conversations at parties, but the kind that keeps companies from losing millions through sloppy processes. I liked the stability. I liked building things people could rely on. And I never expected applause for doing my job. But I didn't expect what happened that Friday either. Our team gathered in the break room at 4 p.m., pretending to celebrate the week's end. Though everyone knew we were there for one person, Kelly. 26, ambitious, loud, always the first to volunteer for tasks, right after I had already done the heavy lifting. She joined the company 2 years after I did, and I trained her. Thoroughly, maybe too thoroughly. The moment I walked in, I saw the decorations. Congrats, Kelly. Banner, gold balloons, a supermarket cake that still had frost around the edges. People were smiling like they were at a wedding. HR showed up with a corporate photographer, which immediately told me this was more than a simple promotion. Her promotion was to process improvement lead. My role? I created the process she improved. I leaned against the counter, coffee cup in hand. I didn't want the champagne. I needed something to hold so I didn't look as out of place as I felt. Kelly stood on a chair in the center of the room, basking in the spotlight. She had rehearsed her speech. It was obvious. "I'm just so grateful," she said, touching her chest dramatically. "This team made me who I am. My manager believed in me. Our director pushed me. And of course, our VP, who saw my potential." She listed every name, every title, except mine. I laughed under my breath, not angrily, just tiredly, because it wasn't surprising. She'd spent the last 6 months making sure upper management forgot who built the system she was now being praised for revolutionizing. Still, it stung. Our department head, Daniel, stood near the door holding a folder. Not a celebratory envelope, a folder. And it wasn't the glossy corporate type. They only use those when the moment is fully approved by PR. This one was plain white. That meant documentation. Documentation always means something. Daniel's the type of manager who never raises his voice, never shows frustration. When he has news, good or bad, he starts the same way, with a tight, polite smile that doesn't reach his eyes. And that's exactly what he wore as he tapped the side of his plastic cup with a pen. "All right, everyone," he said. "Before we wrap this up, I want to address something important." But he wasn't looking at Kelly. He was looking at me. The room stilled, like air thickening before a storm. Kelly lowered her champagne flute, thrown off for the first time all afternoon. "I want to acknowledge the work that went into the audit results this quarter," Daniel said. "There were inconsistencies identified between our documented procedures and the updated flows used in last week's performance review." My stomach tightened. He continued. "Those inconsistencies originated because someone presented an altered version of our workflow improvements, a version that eliminated the attribution of the original design. We discovered it during a review with legal and the VP." I didn't move, didn't breathe. Kelly shifted her weight on the chair. "And because this discovery affects multiple departments," Daniel said, "I'm required to clarify who actually developed the architecture and the reporting logic that produced the savings we've been celebrating." He opened the folder. The room leaned in, quiet, alert, confused. Kelly's smile tightened into something brittle. "The architect of the process, the one who drafted the entire framework, structured the controls, and executed the implementation, was Michael." My name landed like a dropped weight. I felt every head turn toward me, including hers. I didn't want that moment. I didn't ask for it, but I also wasn't going to flinch from it. Kelly blinked fast, like she was calculating how serious this was. Daniel wasn't done. "What's more," he said, The documentation submitted for Kelly's promotion review omitted his name entirely. That raised questions, and we're still looking into how that happened. A pulse of heat moved across my chest. I wasn't vindicated yet. I wasn't even relieved. I was just awake in a way I hadn't been in months. People weren't clapping now. They were watching, waiting, as if the walls themselves sensed something beginning to crack. Daniel closed the folder. "That's all for now," he said in the calm tone of someone who knows more than he just said. "We'll follow up next week." Kelly stepped down from her chair, stiff, pale, eyes darting. She didn't come congratulate me, didn't say thank you, didn't even look my way. She picked up her flute, but she didn't drink from it. Something between us had shifted permanently. Not because I wanted it, but because the truth finally had a witness, and I had no idea then just how far the fallout would go. But it was only the start. The celebration ended the moment Daniel closed that folder. People scattered faster than they had arrived, suddenly very interested in their inboxes, Slack messages, or anything that wasn't eye contact with me or Kelly. I stayed in the break room for a minute, rinsing out my coffee cup just to have something to do with my hands. I wasn't angry yet. I was processing. Discomfort is one thing, but the feeling growing in my chest wasn't discomfort. It was recognition, because what Daniel revealed was more than an awkward public correction. It meant someone had actively removed my work, not forgotten, not accidentally omitted. Removed? That required intent. And intent in a corporate setting always has fingerprints. I tossed the cup and walked back to my desk. My monitor was still on, a spreadsheet open, but I couldn't focus. My mind kept replaying the way Kelly froze when Daniel mentioned legal. Not HR, legal. Legal doesn't join promotion reviews unless something is off. Around 4:30 p.m., while people were quietly packing up, I saw Kelly slip into one of the glass conference rooms with Martin, our manager. He closed the blinds halfway, never fully because corporate policy requires visibility, but enough to tell me it wasn't a friendly chat. Good, I wanted them to talk. What I didn't expect was what happened at 4:42 p.m. My screen blinked with a new email. Subject, RE, Process Documentation Review. From Director, Operations. The message was short. Michael, I'd like to review your original documentation on Monday morning. Please send me the earliest versions and any handover files you provided to Kelly. Daniel, I reread it twice. Earliest versions, not latest, not cleaned up. Earliest. That's what you ask for when you suspect tampering. The email was polite, but between the lines it said, "We found more than we stated publicly." I opened my archive folder. Every file I create goes in two places, the company drive and my personal timestamp backups. It isn't paranoia, it's survival. People forget credits. People repurpose work. People streamline by renaming your files and calling it innovation. So I sent Daniel everything. Drafts, diagrams, reference sheets, the implementation timeline, the testing logs, every piece of proof showing that I built the skeleton of the system long before Kelly even touched it. 5 minutes later, I saw movement through the half-closed blinds of the conference room. Kelly was crying, not the dramatic, attention-seeking kind, the silent, tight-jawed kind you get when you realize you made a mistake that's bigger than you thought. Martin rubbed his forehead, looking exhausted. He wasn't comforting her. He wasn't even speaking. He looked like a man realizing he'd bet on the wrong horse. I didn't know what they were saying, but the outline was obvious. Someone had asked for evidence. Someone had found inconsistencies. Someone was now in trouble. At 5:03 p.m., Kelly walked out, blotting her eyes. She didn't look at me, didn't have to. Her guilt was loud enough without words. Martin came out next. He looked right at me, expression unreadable, then retreated into his office and closed the door without saying a word. That silence told me everything. This wasn't going away. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Monday would be an investigation. I packed my bag, left the office, and stepped into the cool evening air. The building's glass facade reflected the setting sun, gold bleeding into red. For 5 years, I walked out of those doors thinking I was part of something steady, something predictable. But now, something had cracked, and once a crack appears, it only spreads. On the train ride home, I opened my phone and scrolled through old Slack threads. Not messages with Kelly, those were polite, generic, nothing suspicious, but the project channel logs, the change requests, the commit history. There it was, a pattern I hadn't noticed before. 3 months ago, there was a documentation alignment update submitted by Kelly. That's normal. She was responsible for formatting and presentation, but the attachment was not normal. It was a version of my process map with my initials removed from the footnotes. I zoomed in. Maybe it was accidental. Maybe she exported an older draft. But no, she had replaced the initials with Team Lead Draft. Not inaccurate, but deliberately vague. A way to hide credit without lying outright. I scrolled further. 2 weeks later, another revision. This time, the version was presented in a deck for the VP. My name wasn't there either. I felt the irritation finally settle into something sharper. She hadn't just taken credit. She'd built a trail of documents that made it easy to forget I was ever involved. Corporate amnesia, the kind that gets you quietly replaced. I leaned back in my seat. People around me stared at their phones, half asleep from long shifts. To them, it was just another Friday. To me, it was the opening move of something that had been set in motion long before that cake was cut. I wasn't furious. Not yet. I was focused. Because if she had gone this far to erase my work, then the next question was obvious. What else had she altered? And what would happen when the wrong person finally saw the full picture? The train slowed at my stop. I stepped off, the evening wind cold enough to sting. I had the weekend to prepare, to pull every thread, to map out exactly how deep this went. And I knew one thing for certain. Monday wouldn't just be a review. It would be the moment someone finally ran out of places to hide. I didn't sleep much that weekend. I told my wife the basics. Promotion, awkward announcement. Daniel publicly correcting the record. She listened, nodded, said all the right things. "You've been carrying that team for years," she said. "Maybe this is finally the moment they see it." I wanted to believe that. But I knew corporations. They don't see things. They calculate. Saturday morning, I opened my laptop at the kitchen table and started doing what I do best, tracing patterns. I pulled every version of the process documentation from the last year. Decks, PDFs, screenshots from presentations, even emails where someone casually dropped Kelly's new workflow like it had materialized from thin air. When you're an analyst long enough, you stop looking at single events and start looking at sequences. The sequence was ugly. 3 months ago, I send Martin a full framework doc, architecture, logic, risk controls. He replies, "Looks solid. Let's have Kelly clean this up for presentation." 2 weeks later, Kelly sends a cleaned up version to Martin, and the director copied. My initials gone. Notes section edited from drafted by MR to prepared by team. Then the one that made my stomach drop. An email from Martin to the VP. Kelly's process redesign has produced promising early savings. She's taken the lead on our new control structure. No mention of my name. No mention of my Phase 1 design. Just Kelly's redesign. Was it illegal? Probably not. Was it unethical? Absolutely. By Sunday night, I had a timeline. Every place my name had been quietly pushed to the margins. Every moment Kelly and Martin had nudged the narrative in her favor. That's when the real realization hit me. Not about them, but about me. I had made this easy. I had always been the quiet one. The person who said, "It's fine. I'm not doing it for credit." The person who stayed late to fix issues and let someone else present the solution the next morning, because I hate speaking in front of a room. I didn't just get overlooked. I trained them to overlook me. That thought sat in my chest like lead. I wasn't blameless in this dynamic. I hadn't lied, altered files, or campaigned against anyone. But I had made one long-term mistake. I treated visibility like vanity instead of protection. And in corporate life, if you don't protect your work, someone will use it as a stepping stone. By Monday morning, I wasn't going in as the invisible guy who got sidelined. I was going in as the person who finally understood how the game was being played. At 9 a.m. sharp, I got a calendar invite. Documentation review. Conference room B attendees. Director Daniel. Legal counsel HR business partner Michael. No Kelly. No Martin. That detail alone told me this was serious. Conference room B has glass walls facing the hallway. It's intentionally visible. People can see you, but not hear you. Meetings in that room are messages as much as they are conversations. Daniel was already inside when I arrived, flipping through printed pages. My pages. Next to him sat a woman in a navy blazer I recognized from compliance training. Internal counsel. On the other side, our HR business partner, Elena, with a notebook open, pen ready. "Morning, Michael," Daniel said, motioning for me to sit. "Morning," I replied, keeping my voice steady. The lawyer spoke first. "We appreciate you sending your original documentation. We're reviewing how the process improvements were attributed, and we need you to walk us through your involvement. Start from the beginning, please. When did you begin designing this framework?" I opened my own folder. I'd printed everything, highlighted key dates. I wasn't about to rely on memory alone. "I started sketching the initial structure about a year ago," I said. "We were losing track of exceptions in the shipping data. I flagged it to Martin, and he told me to see what I could come up with. So I built a model, these diagrams here, then turned it into a structured process with controls. I laid out the timeline. Calm. Detailed. No embellishments. Every draft I'd sent. Every meeting where I'd presented to my manager. Every follow-up where he'd replied with, "Great, I'll share this up." Elna from HR watched me carefully, like she was measuring not just what I said, but how I said it. The lawyer flipped a page. "And this version," she said, pointing at a printed deck with Kelly's name on the cover, "how involved were you here?" "I never saw that version until Daniel emailed me Friday," I said. "My parts are in here. Same logic, same diagrams. Even a typo I made in a label that's been copied over. But my name was removed from the attribution section." Daniel gave the slightest nod. He'd noticed the typo, too. The lawyer leaned back. "To be clear, no one asked your permission to remove your name or reframe the work as someone else's redesign?" "No," I said, and if they had asked, I would have told them the truth. This was a team implementation built on my original architecture. Kelly did good work on presentation and documentation, but she didn't design the core. I paused. This was the moment I could feel my old self, the one who shrugged off credit, trying to step in and soften it. I didn't let him. "I don't need a parade," I added, "but I do need my work not to be erased." That landed. For a moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning and muffled keyboard clicks from outside. Daniel folded his hands. "Thank you, Michael. That matches what we're seeing in the metadata and version history." Metadata. The word made something click. This wasn't just about my story versus theirs. The system itself was talking. The lawyer nodded. "We're still reviewing all the activity. File changes, access logs, submission trails. We'll be speaking with Martin and Kelly separately. For now, please don't discuss this investigation with them or anyone else." "Understood," I said. There was a time when I would have left it there, grateful anyone was even listening, but that time had passed. "Can I ask something?" I said. "Of course," Daniel replied. "If my name had never been discovered in the old files," I said slowly, "would the company have proceeded with the promotion based on the documentation as it was?" That was the real question, not about Kelly, not about Martin, about the system. Daniel held my gaze for a second longer than was comfortable. "The promotion was approved based on the materials submitted," he said carefully. "Those materials are now under review. That's all I can say." Which, translated out of corporate language, meant yes. I walked out of that meeting with two things I hadn't had before. One, confirmation that I wasn't imagining it. I'd been erased on paper so someone else could climb. Two, a clearer understanding of what kind of company I worked for. Not evil, not cartoonishly corrupt. Just opportunistic. It rewarded whoever stood closest to the spotlight, not whoever built the stage. That's when the real break happened, not in the company, but in me. I stopped seeing myself as the loyal background analyst who should just be grateful to have a job. I started seeing myself as someone who had leverage, data, history, relationships with clients who trusted my work more than the people taking credit for it. On my way back to my desk, I passed the break room. The "Congrats, Kelly" banner was still hanging, slightly crooked now, one corner peeled off. The balloons had sagged just enough to look tired. Kelly was inside, alone, staring at her phone. She looked up when I walked past. For the first time since she joined the company, her expression wasn't confident or rehearsed. It was fear. Our eyes met through the glass. She opened her mouth like she might say something. An apology. An excuse. Anything. I held her gaze for a heartbeat, then kept walking. Because I realized something else that morning. I wasn't the one on trial anymore. And the next time a room went silent, it wouldn't be because they'd forgotten my name. It would be because the truth finally had a microphone. And for once, I was going to make sure it stayed on. By Tuesday morning, the office felt different. Not loud, not dramatic, just tense, like everyone was walking across a floor that might give out at any minute. People noticed Daniel calling Martin into conference room B at 9:03 a.m. People noticed legal joining them. People noticed HR shutting the door all the way, something they only do when the topic is sensitive enough that even the soundproof glass isn't considered sufficient. Nobody said a word, but the silence spoke for them. The real storm had arrived. I opened my laptop and forced myself to work, though I couldn't stop glancing at the conference room every few minutes. Through the glass, I could see Martin's posture, rigid, shoulders tight, head lowered as Daniel walked through printed versions of the documentation. The lawyer had her screen turned toward him. Metadata, file paths, access logs, hard evidence. At 9:46 a.m., Martin rubbed his forehead the way he always did when he was caught in something he couldn't talk his way out of. The lawyer didn't look sympathetic. HR didn't look confused. They all knew exactly what they were looking at, and they knew exactly who altered what. Kelly wasn't there yet. That wasn't a good sign for her, or for Martin. I tried to focus on the weekly automated exception report, but my hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, from something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Power, not revenge, not triumph. Power, the kind that comes from the truth finally mattering. At 10:12 a.m., the door opened. Martin stepped out, not red-faced, not panicking. Worse, he looked defeated, like someone had turned a light on in a room he'd been comfortable keeping dim. He didn't even look at me as he walked to his office and closed the door. 2 minutes later, Kelly arrived at the office and froze when she saw the conference room lineup. Legal, HR, and Daniel, with the same white folder he'd held at the celebration. She blinked rapidly, adjusting the strap of her purse, and I could practically see her calculating escape routes. Daniel stepped out and called her name. Her shoulders dropped. She walked inside. The blinds were closed this time. That was new. I didn't watch the clock, but the meeting felt long. Long enough for my stomach to knot and unknot itself several times. Long enough for me to wonder what she was saying, what she was admitting, denying, spinning. At 11:27 a.m., the door opened. Kelly walked out slowly, expression blank, not devastated, not furious, not defensive. Blank in the way people get when reality finally catches up to them and they run out of stories to hide behind. She saw me at my desk. This time she didn't look away. She approached with hesitant steps, her voice barely above a whisper. "Michael, can we talk?" I looked up. "About what?" Her lips trembled. I messed up. I shouldn't have. I held up a hand. Stop. She did. Whatever you told them, I said quietly. That's between you and them. But don't apologize to clean up the consequences. Apologize when you're ready to mean it. She swallowed hard. I did mean it, she said, but even she sounded unsure. She stepped back, nodding mechanically, then retreated to her desk, avoiding everyone's eyes. The office atmosphere was shifting rapidly now. Looks exchanged, whispers suppressed, screens quickly minimized when someone walked by. People weren't gossiping, they were recalculating alliances. Corporate survival instinct. At noon, Daniel called me into his office. Not the glass conference room this time. His office. That mattered. Close the door, he said. I did. He gestured to the chair. Sit. He wasn't angry. He wasn't tired. He looked resolute. We finished the initial review, he said, folding his hands. The evidence supports your authorship fully. The version history, original timestamps, and internal submissions confirm you built the framework. I nodded once. I already knew. But hearing it was different. Based on the findings, he continued, there will be adjustments. HR will handle the formal actions. So I can't speak to every detail yet. But you should know this. Your work is not only acknowledged, it's being elevated. Elevated how? He pushed a printed memo toward me. A new role, higher grade, direct reporting line to the director, ownership of the controls implementation roadmap for the next fiscal year. I stared at it. I knew promotions don't happen overnight. I knew roles don't get created spontaneously. This wasn't spontaneous. This was a correction. We would have placed you in this track earlier if the documentation had reflected your contributions accurately, Daniel said. That was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get from someone at his level. Then he added something that surprised me. And this is not retaliation toward anyone. HR will manage that separately. This decision is based solely on your documented leadership on the control architecture. Documented. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I exhaled slowly. Thank you. He nodded. Be prepared for some changes on your team in the coming days. Changes. Plural. I stepped out of his office, feeling the weight of the shift. Not victory, not revenge. Something steadier. Like the ground beneath me had stopped tilting. At 2 p.m., HR sent out a calendar invite to the entire department. Mandatory meeting, 4:30 p.m. Conference room. A conference room A isn't for quick meetings. It's for structural announcements. At 4:29, nearly the whole department was seated. People traded nervous glances. Kelly sat rigid, hands clasped tightly. Martin was nowhere in sight. Daniel entered with Elena from HR. He didn't waste time. Thank you for joining. We've completed a review of recent documentation discrepancies related to the Process Improvement Initiative. Effective immediately, we are implementing several organizational changes. The room tensed like a pulled wire. First, Daniel said, Michael will be stepping into a new leadership role overseeing control architecture and process governance. A few murmurs, some surprised, some not surprised at all. Second, he continued, we identified breaches of documentation integrity within the management chain. As a result, Martin has been placed on administrative leave pending final review. Silence. Pure, heavy silence. Kelly stared at her lap, unmoving. And third, Daniel said, as of today, Kelly's promotion is being rescinded. A sound escaped her, small, sharp, involuntary. She looked up at Daniel with wide, terrified eyes. HR stepped forward. This decision is based on formal evidence and policy. Further actions will be discussed privately. Kelly swallowed hard, nodding mechanically, tears forming. She didn't say a word. Not to them, not to me. When the meeting ended, people filed out quietly, the same way they had after her celebration, but this time for a different reason. I stayed seated for a moment, letting the room empty around me. Yesterday I'd been invisible. Today the truth had weight again, and the people who thought they could rewrite it were learning a lesson the corporate world delivers with cold precision. It's easy to steal the spotlight. It's much harder to survive under it. The office felt strangely quiet the next morning, not tense like before, but lighter, as if someone had finally opened a window after months of stale air. I walked in earlier than usual, partly out of habit, partly because I wanted a moment to myself before the day began. My new badge wasn't printed yet, but my access had already changed. When I tapped into the system, the dashboard looked different, cleaner, expanded. A new set of permissions appeared, the kind reserved for people responsible for decisions, instead of just spreadsheets. It didn't feel like revenge, it felt like alignment, like the work I'd been doing in the shadows finally had a place that matched its weight. At 9:15 a.m., I received a calendar invite from the VP of Operations, someone I'd never spoken to directly before. Welcome, meeting, process governance. Lead attendees, VP Operations, Director, Internal Audit, Michael. A welcome meeting for me. As I sat down with the group, the VP didn't offer fake praise or forced compliments. He simply said, I reviewed the savings your framework produced. It's some of the cleanest work I've seen in years. We need this level of structure company-wide. That was it. Direct, unembellished, effective. Exactly the kind of leadership language I respected. We discussed future plans, scaling the controls, aligning with internal audit, preventing the type of documentation drift that had caused the recent fallout. The VP brought up something that hit harder than I expected. Talent doesn't always ask for attention, he said, but leadership needs to know where it actually comes from. That's on us, and it's on you to stay visible. Visible, a word I'd avoided for so long because I convinced myself it didn't matter. Now I saw it for what it really was, not ego, but protection. Visibility keeps the story honest. When the meeting ended, Daniel stayed behind. He waited until the door closed, then said, You handled all of this with remarkable restraint. I almost laughed. Restraint wasn't always my instinct. His expression softened in a way I hadn't seen before. You could have come to me months ago, he said, but I'm not ignoring the fact that the system failed you too. If we'd reviewed the metadata earlier, we would have caught the issues before they escalated. He wasn't making excuses. He was taking responsibility. I nodded. Thank you. Before heading out, he added, and for what it's worth, I meant it. This role fits you. You've been doing half of it already. That stayed with me longer than I expected. Later that afternoon, as I walked through the hallway past conference room A, I spotted Kelly sitting with HR. The blinds were open this time, and her posture told the whole story. Slumped shoulders, red eyes, a pile of printed documents in front of her. I didn't slow down, not out of coldness, but because I finally understood what part of this story was mine and what part wasn't. She wasn't my responsibility. Her choices were. And Martin? He cleared out his office 2 days later. Administrative leave quietly became mutual separation. In corporate terms, that meant he wasn't coming back. People whispered, people speculated. People adjusted their tones when speaking to me. I didn't engage, I didn't posture, I didn't celebrate, because the truth didn't need a parade. It just needed room. Over the next few weeks, I settled into my new role. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just steadily. I built new controls, revised outdated systems, held training sessions that actually helped people instead of confusing them. Internal audits started looping me into conversations they never included analysts in before. The VP started stopping by to ask, does this make sense from a control standpoint? The best part wasn't the recognition. It was the clarity. For the first time in years, I wasn't fighting to be seen. I was simply doing my work, and the structure around me finally reflected the reality of that work. One evening, as I gathered my things to leave, I noticed the reflection of the old "Congrats, Kelly" banner still faintly visible in the glass of a storage cabinet. Someone had shoved it inside weeks ago. The lettering was bent, the edges frayed. It felt like a symbol, not of her downfall, but of the illusion that had been hanging over all of us. The idea that recognition naturally finds its way to the right people. It doesn't. People find it. People fight for it. People claim it. I walked past it without opening the door. On Friday, just as I was about to head out, I received a short message from Daniel. Good work this week. Also, don't forget to take credit where it's due. Have a good weekend. It wasn't advice from a manager. It was advice from someone who understood the difference between modesty and self-erasure. As I stepped outside, the evening air felt crisp, not cold, not heavy, just clean. Like the kind of air you breathe when something finally clicks back into place. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt balanced, grounded, exactly where I was supposed to be. In the end, the story wasn't about a stolen promotion or a rigged review or even corporate politics. It was about learning to take ownership of the work I'd quietly carried for years. It was about realizing that fairness doesn't just happen. You build it, like any structure, brick by brick, control by control, decision by decision. And sometimes the loudest justice isn't a dramatic confrontation or a public downfall. Sometimes it's just the calm that finally settles in when truth stops needing a microphone. Because when the dust all cleared, one thing remained. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't replaceable. And this time, every name was exactly where it belonged.